It's time for Taking Care of Business on Midlands 103. With thanks to the local enterprise offices of Leash, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Taking Care of Business. I'm Ronan Berry, and coming up over the next hour, Ireland, as you're probably aware, plays a very central role in regulating many of the world's biggest tech companies. Of course, Portarlington has a role to play in that too. Mullingar's Joan Mulvihill, though, will join me a little bit later to discuss recent scrutiny of the DPC, including recruitment concerns raised at a Oireachtas level and what it all means for trust, governance and Ireland's standing as Europe's digital regulator. Because, it's hard to believe we're at the end of quarter 1, 26 already. And again, we're probably all going, where did those couple of months go and what a few months they have been. But when markets are volatile, leadership definitely gets tested. James Martin will be here later on to explore how coaching-led leadership can help small businesses stay clear-headed, resilient and better equipped to deal with uncertainty, rising costs and constant change. Again, very, very timely yet again as we start another year where there is nothing but disruption out there right across the globe, and particularly coming from the Middle East. And yet again, I find myself today looking at news headlines and hearing video clips coming mainly from the US of A, and they would just leave you dumbfounded and exacerbated and just, I don't know, sometimes you would wonder what's going on out there. Basically the UK being told, if you want your oil, go get it from the Straits yourselves because you didn't help us when we needed you. And NATO didn't stand up. And it just shows the complete disregard and lack of understanding of why NATO exists in the first place, all over a war of choice. But anyway, let's see where that's going to lead. But unfortunately, all the indicators aren't great at the minute. Let's see how your small business can stay more resilient with some coaching-led leadership a little bit later in the show. Also, another positive story though, there is lots of positive news happening in business circles too, including the possibility of a vineyard in South Offaly. Yes, I kid you not. You'll hear about that in just a couple of moments. If you want to join the conversation on this evening's show, 083 3010 103 is the text or WhatsApp number, powered by Lamb Brothers Toyota on the Arden Road in Tullamore. Would love to have your opinion of what's happening, what I'm discussing and what's going on in your business world. But if you are like many listeners that tune in from across the Midlands and the wider Midlands region, you will know what limescale can do in your water. You'll know the impact it can have on everything from the kettle right up to some major appliances in your house, some of which may be quite expensive to run and manage. Many of the areas across the three counties are very much affected by limescale in their water supply. And again, when at a time when costs are continuously adding up, is there a solution out there? And you're probably aware of some solutions on the market, but a relatively new one has popped up in this country recently. Kilcormac's Greg Commins is director of Aquabion Ireland, which is building its presence in the Irish market with a water treatment product aimed at reducing limescale and corrosion in commercial and industrial settings without chemicals, salt, electricity or ongoing maintenance. Hopefully that catches your attention. Greg joins me now to discuss the business case behind the product and how they intend to get the product to market and continue distributing right across the country. Good evening, Greg, and welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thanks very much, Ronan, and thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
A pleasure. Tell us about Aquabion Ireland. I mean, how did it get started and where does the product come from in the first place?
So the Aquabion started in Germany. It's a German-made product and it's over 20 years on the market. It also is in 25 different countries. So there was a need there to be eco-friendly and not to use salt in your water, to have kind of an eco-friendly solution. So with that, we saw market opportunity, and the biggest thing for customers is that cutting down of overall costs for businesses and for residential customers across the different markets. So the big thing with limescale and corrosion, it'll affect your pipework, your equipment in the house and that as well. So that's kind of a quick run through.
I suppose the key question, how it differentiates or what makes it different from other systems that people might be aware of or might be currently using in their houses?
Yeah, so as an alternative solution is the benefit of no salt. You don't have to stock in salt, and I suppose the older generation as well, I see with my parents as well having to store salt and that it had been an issue. But It's you have other conditions there where people cannot use salt products, and you're actually not changing the taste of the water at all. It's you're just changing the structure of the limescale, which breaks down.
So where was the technology first developed?
Yeah, it was developed in Germany by Mark Flettner, and the company is branched out in 25 countries now, and we're just making a presence here in Ireland because we have a huge interest since our recent Home and Expo show in Tullamore.
You've brought some of the products to show me there this evening, and I know there's large units that can be used in industrial settings, on apartment blocks as well. The one that you said would be typical for an Irish household, I think if people see it, it's quite small. They might be surprised how small. Is that it in terms of it's about maybe 300 mil, 400 mils long, that can fit under the sink, and that's really it?
That's exactly it, Ronan. Yeah, so it's the unit is quite small. Just to give you an idea, from the iPhone, from the base of the iPhone to just under the camera, it's that small. So that replaces your salt water softener, and it gives you back lots of extra space there as well. So it's there's lots of very good reports on it.
And the installation then, what's that process like? Does it take long to install?
Depending on the scenario, it goes on the mains water feed into your home. So generally that's kind of maybe under the sink or that. But once it's installed, we do have professional installers around the country, and once the product is installed, we need to have it registered, and we then offer a 5-year warranty on the product.
Just give us an idea, how big an issue or problem is limescale in water?
Limescale is a huge factor, really, because for example, 1 millimetre of limescale leads to about 10% loss of efficiency in appliances, boilers, cylinders, heat systems, and when you get to 5 millimetres, then that's a 50% loss. So that's typically where it tops out, but the damage is already done at that stage.
And as well as I mentioned at the starter, people might be used to seeing a bit of limescale in a kettle, but in this day and age with bigger systems like heat pumps and all that, is it now a bigger issue that people are experiencing with limey water?
Well, it's quite a big issue around the Midlands, we notice, and but the way Aquabion breaks down the limescale, it basically restructures it. So, and it's not really it's not a softener, it's a water conditioner, and it just changes the structure of the limescale, making the molecules bind together so they don't stick and affect your pipework and appliances. Your
route to market on this one, you're very much focused on a B2B. You've been engaging quite a few of the hardwares around the country as well. Is that your kind of sole route? You're looking at those being distributors for your product, and then do you need to upskill plumbers or other professionals in terms of installation and maintenance on it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So our market as a sole distributor for Ireland, all products come in through ourselves. So we have a number of merchants around the country, and we're looking to add to that. So if you have a local merchant or installer that needs a product, they can get in touch with us, and we can get them on board. As regards training, we do offer training to installers. We also have we have a new installer that we met at the recent show there, Derek Kelly from Thermatech Heating and Plumbing, and he has his branding on his van, and he's covering all this area. So we're looking to expand all the time.
People who may know you will know that you come from a tech and customer support background. That's something you're keen to build into this business model too, because once it's installed, really, that's only the start of the process.
Yeah, well, it's kind of an install and forget, really, because you don't have any worries for it'll last up to 5 to 7 years. You get it installed, no salt, no maintenance, no electricity, and no chemicals, basically. So with that, then once it comes up to the time, then you just replace out the unit. So it's a great fit and forget solution.
Yeah. And we've spoken, I suppose, it's the kind of natural part of the conversation. We speak a lot about single households or the private individual who might be buying this, say, through hardware or through a plumber. But this has the capability to work with large-scale developments too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So from a household point of view, we have a product there that's the S15 for a house with 1 or 2 showers. with occasional use will be the main solution for most houses in Ireland, with the option of, for 2 or more showers, we have the S20. But in relation to industrial, we cover apartment blocks, we cover industrial units, and it goes right up to the F250, which is a 10-inch unit.
Really, any size building, any size development. Is there a commercial element in terms of, like, say, commercial units too, like factories, workshops, are all could install this?
Exactly. Anyone that uses water, whether it's consumed or whether it's used for washing or anything through there, you still need to protect your equipment and your pipework. So that's where you need to treat the limescale.
What got you into this business in the first instance, given that your background was in tech? What was it that drew you, I suppose, caught your attention and then made you set up your own company?
Yeah, well, I'd done a good bit of research on Aquabion, and there's lots of resources online, and how it's won a lot of awards from Germany over to the Tokyo Design Awards recently for 2026. So it has appeared, and there's lots of tried and tested, and I got the product myself and been very happy with it. So, and yeah, been very good feedback. So it's kind of a no-brainer then just to bring it to market, because we have a market for it. So
for any plumbers or any potential distributors that are listening as well, what's the key thing they need to know? Because I can imagine going in somewhere with a new product, you've a lot of convincing and selling to do, but what are the key things that you know will make Aquabion a success and maybe a good product for them to have on their shelves?
Yeah, the biggest thing for us is to know that the product is correctly installed. So, that's where we deal with the warranty process. When the installer connects the product and we get verification of photos, we verify that it's correctly installed, correctly earthed, and then we can then offer the 5-year warranty. But the difference is if they don't do the correct installation, the product won't last for the longevity of what it should do. And we're here to support both the installers and customers.
Yeah, sounds very exciting as well. And give people an idea, if they want to find out more about your product and your company, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can go to our website, aquabionireland.ie/contact. There's a contact form there you fill out. You put in your suggested number of showers in your home, and we can then put you in touch with a local installer or merchant. In relation to commercial or industrial, we can receive an email at projects@aquabionireland.ie or info@aquabionireland.ie, but reach out, we're here to help.
I'm going to ask you a terrible question now. The product has been developed for a number of years now. Roughly how many of them are currently in operation around the globe?
There's many. Too many to mention.
I can just imagine. But if people just look up Aquabion anyway, you'll find out all about it too. Greg, it's a really interesting venture by yourself. As I say, many people listening will be very familiar with the issues that limescale causes in all sorts of devices and appliances around the house. The very best of luck with it, and look forward to getting an update on it very soon.
Thanks very much. And just to give a shout out to my other colleague directors there as well. So we're just, it's been a success so far, and we're looking to bring it to your home.
Well, there you go. Greg Commins there from Kilcormac in County Offaly. It's time for a quick break. After that, I'm going to bring you a really interesting story from County Offaly, because very soon we might have wine. Yes, wine produced in County Offaly.
Taking care of business with thanks to the local enterprise offices of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
Stephen Whyte is the founder of Irish Wine Estates and a farmer's son from South Offaly who, after university, followed a career in the food industry before moving into software and then selling his business a few years ago. He is now developing a vineyard and visitor centre near the villages of Dunkerrin and Shinrone in Offaly. Yes, you heard that correctly, County Offaly, with ambitions not only to produce Irish-grown wine but also to bring new tourism opportunities to the region. Stephen joined Will Faulkner on Midlands Today yesterday, and naturally, Will asked him about why a vineyard and why the Irish Midlands.
We also noticed there's a big industry in England. There's over 1,000 vineyards in England at the moment. There's over 200 wineries. There's over 10 million bottles of wine being produced in the United Kingdom right now. Last year, in fact, an English sparkling wine won the global award for best sparkling white wine, beating the champagne houses. So there is wine being produced that cannot be called champagne in south of England.
Because it has to be in that region of France in order to be called champagne.
That's right.
But it's, from a critic's point of view, it's a superior product.
From a critic's point of view, it's a superior product. And there's actually a Limerick man from Kilmallock called Dermot Sugru, who is an Irishman who's one of the top winemakers in the UK. So it's a big industry there, and it's succeeding there. So we thought, well, it could, in theory, succeed in Ireland.
Well, forgive my complete ignorance, because I would have assumed, from a climate point of view, we wouldn't have the weather. It's not warm enough.
It's borderline. It's definitely borderline. So we took a lot of data from Gorteen Agricultural College's weather station. So to grow grapes and ripen the grapes, which is the critical stage, the ripening, you need a certain amount of what's called growing degree days, GDD. And the minimum threshold is about 800, what's called 800 GDD and upwards. And based on Gorteen data, we're just above that minimum threshold. We're installing our own weather station on our own farm so we get more accurate data. And then what we're doing is we're planting varieties that are called cold climate varieties that have a better chance. They ripen earlier in this climate. So fingers crossed, we will produce some grapes, we'll ripen some grapes. Our issue will be we may not get the yields. We may not get enough grapes, enough liquid, so we'll be producing potentially small volumes, which drives up the cost per bottle per se.
And would it make a difference on flavour? I know certainly with red wines, let's say they're from the hotter parts of Spain, there's more tannin, it's heavier.
That's right. Yeah.
Is there something equivalent here?
Yes, we're going to focus initially on white wines, and in particular sparkling white wines, because you don't have to ripen the grapes as much, and the sparkling process of a traditional method, aging it in the lees, is more forgiving. It's easier to do. Producing a premium red wine here in Ireland is probably impossible. We'll have a go and we'll experiment, but we're going to focus very much on the white wine and in particular the sparkling white wine. That said, we become very good friends with a small vineyard in Lusk, North Dublin, called Luska Vineyard. And the winery up there, and David Llewellyn up there, is making superb red wine from a grape called Rondo, which we are growing and does ripen. So if we can come anywhere near what David Llewellyn is doing up in Lusk in North County Dublin, we will produce a good quality red wine.
So we've taken it up to the point of the grape. So even if you can grow the grape, what has to happen next? So eventually you get a bottle on a shelf that somebody will buy.
Yeah. So our plan is, the reality is it's going to be expensive to produce our wine. And because we're focusing on sparkling white wine, we're a little bit hampered with the duty. There's €8 of duty per bottle of sparkling wine here in Ireland. And by the time the duty and the VAT goes on, our wine is going to be expensive. So we're aiming to try and produce a premium product and then do wine tours and tastings on the vineyard, hopefully bring tourists and locals who are interested in wine into our vineyard, experience how we grow the grapes, how we produce the wine, see it in process, and hopefully sell direct to consumer, and that way try and make some margin out of it.
That's Stephen Whyte, the founder of Irish Wine Estates, on that highly ambitious project to bring a vineyard and indeed a tourism opportunity to South Offaly. Don't you just love that level of ambition and people who just want to put their heads together, put some money behind it and make it happen? Trust Will Faulkner, of course, to get the story about a new vineyard in the county, to get the first scoop on that. Fair play to him, but brilliant story. And again, it goes to show you that with all the volatility and uncertainty out there, people are still willing to just build those businesses. And so many of you who've been on the show and so many of you who listen know that firsthand from listening to the show over the years. And I always commend that. Like, the amount of businesses that set up during the COVID pandemic is really astounding. And they've gone on to great success around the Midlands too. So we will keep on covering those throughout on this show over the next couple of years and months anyway. Speaking of resilience though and volatility, and very shortly you'll hear from James Martin of the Leadwood Coaching Institute about how small businesses can stay clear-headed, resilient and be better equipped to deal with uncertainty, rising costs and constant change, especially given everything that's taken place at the minute. But I'm going to take a quick break, but after that we're going to talk about the Data Protection Commission, including some concerns that were raised at an Oireachtas level recently about hiring within the organisation, given that it is really Europe's digital regulator.
taking care of business. With thanks to the local enterprise offices of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
You'll be aware that Ireland occupies a pivotal position in European tech regulation because many of the world's biggest digital platforms have their main EU base here. That means Ireland's Data Protection Commission has an outsized role in policing data rights across Europe. Recent evidence, though, to an Oireachtas committee has raised questions about recruitment and oversight within that organisation. Remember a couple of years ago when there was people were asking suggestively, does Mark Zuckerberg know where Portarlington is? Because if you look up the Data Protection Commission, you'll see that their main offices are at Pembroke Row in Dublin, but they also have their office still at Canal House and Station Road in Portarlington. So Portarlington has been on the world map for quite a while. Whether Mark Zuckerberg knows where it is just yet, we don't know, but maybe he certainly should as well. I'm delighted to be joined now by Joan Mulvihill from Mullingar to unpack what has been discussed at the Oireachtas level recently and why it matters and what it could mean for Ireland's standing as Europe's digital regulator. Joan is a former digitalisation and sustainability lead at Siemens Ireland and a former CEO of the Irish Internet Association, so she brings both technical and policy insights to this discussion. Good evening, Joan. Can you hear me, Joan? Good evening, Joan.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Fantastic as well. Joan, I suppose many people mightn't know of what's been going on recently, particularly with the Data Protection Commission and in the Oireachtas report. Can you give us an overview, though, I suppose, just give people a sense of context as to Ireland's role as Europe's tech regulator?
Okay, so in absolute terms, Ireland is not in charge of data protection for the whole of Europe. Every country has their own data protection commissioner. But the reason Ireland has a particularly significant role is because the headquarters of most of the major international technology social media companies are headquartered in Ireland. So this means that our data protection commissioner is possibly, and without doubt, actually, the most the largest in scope and the most powerful data protection commissioner in Europe. In any individual country, the data protection commissioner there is responsible for the protection of the privacy of, their citizens. But if any of their citizens, if any of the citizens have a concern and they go to, and the data protection commissioner is investigating anything that's happening there and it has farther reaching consequences than what is the rights of the citizens in that country alone, then it must be reverted to the data protection commissioner of the country where that company is resident or headquartered. And in most cases, that is Ireland. And that is why the Data Protection Commissioner in Ireland is probably the most prominent in Europe. And the reason that this has all become a bit of a brouhaha in recent weeks has been because there was a very interesting session, a joint Oireachtas committee on justice last week, and Dr. Johnny Ryan, and I will confess I've known Dr. Johnny Ryan for a long time, made some very interesting comments in relation into Ireland's Data Protection Commission, the Office of the Data Protection Commission in Ireland, and some of the decisions that we might have been making over the last number of years, or rather lack of decisions. And I guess that's what you really want to talk to us about today.
Yeah, and I know there's a number of things that have been brought up at Oireachtas level over the past while, and particularly last week was really around the recruitment as well, because obviously given the context of the DPC and that you've given us there, they've had to probably recruit extensively to try and keep pace with demands. I mean, even with the likes of GDPR coming in, it probably put an extra demand on them. But has that been a challenge for them, or indeed how have they responded to that challenge?
So it's interesting. Back in the day when I started out my career in tech, I was in the Irish Internet Association, and the Data Protection Commission back then was a small office above a shop in Portlaoise. And I'd say most social media companies in the country, was it Portlaoise or Portarlington? Somewhere down in the Midlands anyway. And I say that from Mullingar. Portarlington, sorry, yes. And I knew it was one of the ports, and it was really kind of quite small. Now, it obviously became much more prominent, as I say, in the years as more and more digital legislation was enacted, and as I suppose more of the challenges around protecting privacy of data came more to the fore in terms of policy, and people became increasingly concerned, and legislators obviously were legislating for that. And now that small, tiny office is employs up to 300 people in the Data Protection Commission in Ireland. There's 300 staff in the DPC, and it has a budget of 33 million euros. So it is not insignificant in terms of public expenditure, and they're asking for, I think I understand from that presentation last week, in addition 10 million in funding. So it is a very important arm of government, effectively, or agency of government, and particularly in light of the high number or importance of foreign direct investment that we get from technology companies in Ireland. So as I say, it's significantly more resource than it used to be. There's an awful lot more legislation. I always smile. GDPR and I actually share a birthday, not year, but we were both enacted on the 25th of May, and GDPR in 2018. And again, a lot of the discussion last week was on GDPR, but again, it's all coming to the fore too, because as we question what we're doing in terms of regulating for AI, if we're not even getting the basics right on GDPR, then we really have to ask, where we are in terms of being at the races in relation to legislating for AI. So this conversation is particularly pertinent at the moment. And as I say, Johnny Ryan did raise a number of issues in relation to recruitment. So as I say, back in the day, small office in Portarlington, most people couldn't tell you who the Data Protection Commissioner was then. And then a new Data Protection Commissioner was appointed. I don't want to get into naming names. It's not really about the person. It's about the role of the Public Appointment Service. I think was one of the biggest, I suppose the biggest spotlight was on it last week, I felt, because there was serious questions raised by Johnny Ryan having, produced the documentation around that recruitment process. So a lot of those public sector roles in state agencies, agencies like this or regulators, they're drawn a lot of the time from a pool of existing civil servants. Now, it's not to say some of them are not open to people in the private sector to apply. They absolutely are. But the recruitment process tends to follow the competency framework for, here is somebody who knows how to, inverted commas, manage a department, run an office. And so exactly the same kind of criteria were applied to this role, with very little significance given or importance given to technical knowledge.
So generic management skills as opposed to enforcement expertise.
Very little enforcement experience. And one of the things, as I say, to quote Dr. Johnny Ryan, and he's the one who's done all the research into this, so I'm going to defer to his better knowledge, but he said that the panel was made up of only one technical person. They worked for a legal firm in tech, and there was 10 minutes of questions devoted to a bit of technical and a bit of other. So not even a full 10 minutes. And only one person really with that technical expertise. There was someone from the Public Appointment Service and two others from the department. So there was a bit of a question mark over whether or not we were recognising the significance of technical knowledge in relation to recruiting for these roles. He also said, which I found particularly concerning, is in the most recent appointment. So one person had held that role for 5 years. That person has now gone on to work for a legal firm, which I'll come back to in a minute. But the person who's currently holding the position, I think 7 people known to Dr. Johnny Ryan. So just for context, Johnny Ryan has worked in the private sector. He was actually served on the board of the Irish Internet Association while I was the CEO there. So full disclosure, I've known him, as I say, for nearly, certainly 15 years. He's worked in the private sector, but he is also on the Irish Centre. He works for the Irish Centre for Civil Liberties. He's very, very experienced. He's incredibly knowledgeable, and he is completely dispassionate and objective about what he is doing. Very passionate about what he's doing, but, it's not about personalities. It's very much around the facts. And I think he did raise some concerns about the fact that he knew that 7 well-known, credible enforcers had applied for that position and were not even called for interview, not even shortlisted for interview. Now, I found that particularly shocking and very disheartening. And the previous incumbent in the DPC, the previous commissioner, has now gone to work for a legal firm who are actually the legal representatives for Meta. The current DPC has formerly worked for Meta. And so there are some flags being raised or questions. It's not to cast aspersions on either of those individuals, but it is around the process and how rigorous we are being around technical knowledge or being an enforcer, recognized as someone who does enforcement and knows how to do that and will do that. There were some specific examples that he gave in relation to Meta in particular, where the Irish DPC had been asked to investigate Meta for over 5 years and had, I'm going to say, refused, declined, not done so. And not only had they stalled and not done that investigation, even though being asked to do so by every other DPC in Europe, by the board of the European Board of Data Protection, had asked the Irish DPC to investigate Meta, and for 5 years refused to do so. And not only refused to do so, but then tried to sue the European Data Protection Board.
It gets deeply complicated and complex. And I know
it gets
the full transcript of that, I must say to the listeners of that Oireachtas hearing or committee, is actually online. You can just look it up, as I have done in advance of the show as well. And people can read through the various things put forward and the various bits of evidence that were submitted as part of this. What's the outcome? What's the kind of word on the street been following these, that when it was brought up last week from like yourself, that is closely tied in with industry?
I think what's happening is a lot of people now are looking at that and saying, why have we not investigated Meta? And is our over-reliance on foreign direct investment compromising our position in relation to our credibility as an enforcer of data protection? It is impacting. My understanding is that it is impacting our good standing in Europe. I think the general comparison that has been made, it was made in the committee meeting last week, but it has been made by other people. It's been made by myself, is Europe has looked at Ireland over the years and accused us maybe of being a data haven and a tax haven. And now they're looking at us going, well, now we're a data haven. We need to be seen to be credible in relation to being able to impose regulation and protect all European citizens. And that is our role by virtue of those companies being here. So you cannot be a good European citizen state and be a data haven that allows, a kind of a disregard for European citizens' privacy and data. So absolutely. I think, you can't, my comment on LinkedIn was, you cannot ride both horses. You can't take the foreign direct investment and be a good European state and EU citizen and say, but we're going to have all those companies here because we love all that, and that's all great for revenue and everything. But with great power comes great responsibility, as I say, and we do have a responsibility to European citizens. This is also going to become a bigger issue too in the context of AI and regulation and innovation. So what's happening at the moment globally is this huge competition for the innovators around AI. Europe would be considered to be somewhat behind because we're so pro-regulation, and the rest of, so America is a bit more the Wild West, and they're like, I've often said they're applying the Milton Friedman's rules of economics, which is it's the role of any organization to maximize its profits within the law. And therefore, if you can get rid of the laws and regulations, you can just maximize profits with absolutely no regard for anybody other than your profitability. Europe have always taken a much more responsible approach to their citizens and made sure that their data was
absolutely
protected.
And it's not just in tech. The same has been said about pharmaceutical and about manufacturing that has standards too. Joan, I'm so sorry, we're hitting a time limit now. We have another guest to get in as well in a few minutes. But thank you so much. Undoubtedly, it's a story we're going to hear a lot more of, and I suppose it does put that focus back on all maybe state boards or state, the people that organisations that have a huge role in terms of how the state operates and things are regulated as well.
There is an issue with these companies managing to infiltrate a lot of boards, and we need to be very careful. There's a lot of surreptitious lobbying that can happen in that way, and it's not to cast aspersions on anyone who are in those roles, but there is a responsibility on the Public Appointment Service to make sure that we do all the necessary rigours and checks, and that we have the most balanced and fair enforcers of regulation is absolutely possible.
Joan Mulvihill, thank you so much for that this evening. There you go, food for thought indeed. And I suppose there is so much talk lately about those very large digital platforms too. And I mean, how many countries are now discussing laws about banning it for certain age groups, that type of thing. So there's a big story there. I say that full transcript of that hearing in the Oireachtas last week is available online. You can just look it up there, look for Dr. Johnny Ryan, and you can have a read through it yourself and listen back to what Joan has been speaking about there. But important points, I believe, to raise as well. Time for a quick break. After that, we're going to talk about leadership in times of volatility.
Taking care of business with thanks to the local enterprise offices of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Find us on localenterprise.ie and let's talk business.
Is it fair to say that leadership is under pressure in most sectors, not just to deliver results, but to really help your business navigate uncertainty, rising costs yet again, and constant change? Well, James Martin is co-founder of the Lead with Coaching Institute, which works with directors, senior leaders and business teams to develop coaching-led leadership, stronger communication and more resilient organisations. God knows we need that at this day and age. Yet again, we find ourselves back here. Even James, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
James, people will probably know you over the years from your kind of business mentoring and coaching as well, but the Lead with Coaching Institute is a relatively new development. How did it come about?
Yeah, it's probably something that we had been dreaming about for years, probably over a decade at this stage, because we had been working with senior leaders and directors, helping them to develop their business. And we wanted to have a suite of offerings to support not just the frameworks in business, but actually to develop their leadership and develop their teams.
So you spotted a gap in the market. What specifically was that gap, and then how did you go about trying to fill that?
So our main purpose was to develop healthy leaders, healthy teams that would lead to healthy organisations and healthy ecosystems. And that was very much about creating a psychological safe workplace and a culture that was very attractive to bring in top talent, but also to retain top talent. And we saw, particularly in a country with full employment, there was an opportunity there to look at how do you take care of your people and how do you really develop them in a way that can realise their true ambition.
In terms of the size or scale of companies that you can work with, had you a particular target in mind?
Well, we've worked with different size of companies. The company that was doing $1 million a year are helping them to get to $1 million a month, the same from 10 million to 50. And now we're doing a lot more with companies in that 50 to 250 million bracket. And yet it's the same principles of leadership for all strands of business. I
always commend when somebody can link, building psychological safety in the workplace, but also, increasing revenues and actually, looking at the bottom line too. I think it's so important in any business.
Absolutely.
Are businesses rethinking how they develop leaders now?
Absolutely. Because even in times of uncertainty, it's not about how many people you employ. It's about making sure that you're getting the most from the team and the leaders that's there. And if you develop the leaders in the right way, I think that was the thing, the gap that we're really seeing is we were seeing a lot of leaders that were expert leaders, but to develop great companies and great businesses, we were helping the companies develop leaders that could lead teams, lead systems, and particularly leaders that could lead in a complex world. And that's where the coaching really comes into play.
And I suppose, never mind the complexities coming from the macro environment, even on a micro level now with the onslaught of various technologies. And even last week there was talks about AI fatigue, with people being so efficient and trying to do so much with AI, they're actually getting tired of it. So the landscape is constantly evolving for leaders then. And so how did you look at kind of dividing that down into the areas that you can then work on? And what sort of products did you develop to help people develop there?
Well, we always looked at companies were around two kind of key areas, people and relationships. And now with the evolution of AI, it's around people, AI and relationships. So we've been always in that space of, first of all, developing the frameworks for business so that people had the structure to develop and grow. But now we've actually focused even further on, we created a diploma in coaching for leaders that's now internationally accredited, and a suite of training with team coaching days and one-to-one coaching for those key leaders and key principles within the business.
typical, I suppose, course times for those programs? Are they delivered in person? Are they on site? Are they blended? And how long does it take for people to make their way through them?
So we have it in a number of different offerings. We have it divided into micro-credentials, into 4-hour sessions, online, offline. But the majority of people now are taking them in person. Like our next course would be in Mullingar. So that's 5 days. And then in 6 months' time, they'll do another 5 days and complete the entire diploma in coaching. And some of it can be done online as part of that work as well. So it's allowing the leaders to be able to take small chunks of time out of their workplace. But what's really important is what we do on those courses, they can bring right back into their organisation the following day, and that's what's critical.
And there's also that peer-to-peer learning too. If they're sitting with fellow business people in the room, they're big, because when something happens, like 4 weeks ago, and Iran gets attacked, and we know what's been happening ever since, and it's changing hour by hour, minute by minute, or tweet by tweet at this stage as well. So, an important time for business owners to really look at all elements of the decision making, the communication, but even trying to have a calm as ahead as possible in volatile times.
Absolutely, and I think one of the real strengths of our work is it's almost creating those thinking rooms where the best minds in the business come into a room. They spend time to think about the business, strategically work on the journey ahead, and regardless of what's happening in the outer world, what's really at the heart of great businesses is the psychology and the mindset of the leader. And regardless of what's happening externally, that's at the heart of great businesses.
If anybody checks out your website, you'll see some very well-known names there, including Jerry Duffy, another great man from Mullingar. Some people might be listening, some business people thinking, they hear the word coaching, it sounds a bit vague or soft to them. But this is with all the leadership experience and years of experience of doing this as well. Are there any examples, without even naming names, of maybe companies or organisations that you've worked with, and maybe it shatters any myths or any illusions people might have about what coaching actually is?
Yeah, like even if you take some of the larger companies, like the likes of Microsoft or LinkedIn or any of the larger American organisations, they have coaching as part of their DNA. So every leader, every manager is being developed as a coach, and that's to support. It's moving towards a growth and development culture and creating a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and a sense of a great employee experience. And of course, when competition rises within the pool of talent, then people will be attracted to the companies that take care of them, develop them, and realise their true ambition.
Is there an element too of unlocking, let's call it hidden talent in your organisation?
Absolutely. And this is where we see where you can put the right frames and structures within an organisation. We watched some of the junior talent rise within the organisation when there's clear success parameters, clear dashboards, and clear ways for those members to grow and develop. We've watched some of the juniors rise quite quickly. And of course, everything that we do is about building leadership capacity and that leadership and business unit. So it means that the more people you can develop early, help them make decisions. Like some of the international companies would say to us, James, we cannot get people to make decisions. And that's a culture. And we've been supporting a lot of early decision making, early problem solving, and now those juniors rising to the number 2s and number 3s, they now want the top positions. In the past, they didn't want them because they didn't have the development, they didn't have the tools, and didn't have the skills, and that's what we're trying to address in the LCI.
Are companies, have they gotten better at making decisions that are now based more on data and figures? Are we relying less on our gut instincts these days as business people, or is there room to improve in that area?
The language of business is numbers, and everything is driven in terms of the numbers. If we're in business, we mean business, but what's behind a great business? It's people and the work relationships, and that's where we work on. That's where we focus and help the senior directors, the senior leaders, to garner the power of their people. And it's amazing to watch those companies when the people and the energy come alive within an organisation. Everything becomes possible in the business.
If you had a go of senior leaders around the table, what's the one issue that they're all afraid to openly say is present in their business?
I think in certain businesses, it is that the top talent is sometimes the chokehold in the business, because they are the engineer, they are the pharmacist, they are the person that has their craft, or they're the specialist. But to develop great businesses, it's now a new skill set, because you're developing leaders that can build teams, that can really cultivate the systems and to deal with complexity across the board. And that's the skill set that those leaders are now becoming more and more aware of in order to unlock the true potential in their business.
Well, it's the Lead With Coaching Institute. If you just look it up online there, check across LinkedIn for James Martin and his team, connect with them, talk to them and go from there. James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for that this evening, and certainly it's caught my attention. We'll talk again soon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ron.
That's bringing this evening's show to a close. Hopefully you've found it useful and insightful as well. Next week we'll go back and maybe try and get more sense of what's happening, and what the latest fallout from the Middle East is as well. But clearly we're at a time where strong leadership and a strong decision-making process is paramount to business success, and as James mentioned there, even for talent attraction and talent retention. Hopefully you've enjoyed this evening's show. Well done to James and to Greg earlier, who've looking at them through one eye this evening, thanks to a little mishap out in the garden at home today. But you can check out the social media footage and see exactly what that might look like. JC is here next though. It's not Joe Cooney. John Cusack is here with Country Roads. Have a great week. I'll talk to you all on Taking Care of Business next week.